begin. And let's remember where we're up to. Tonight, Be'ezras Hashem, let us really get into Tanoim and part of Amoraim, and we'll understand how much world politics, how much the current events of what was going on during that time, Mamish shapes our Messiah that we have today, our Mishnayos, our Gemara, and here it goes. Well, we learned last time that let's try to divide the Tanam into three groups. We divide the Tanam into the first 100 years, the next 75 years, and the next 75 years. The first 100 years of Tanam was really the last 100 years of the Beis HaMikdash, which, just to put things in perspective, is really from year, the secular year, basically from year 1. Maybe from year 20 BCE. But we're talking about basically year 0, maybe a few years before, is where the first 100 years of Tanam start. And that was 100 years of the Beis HaMikdash. That was 100 years of Hillel, Nachamish Gamzu, not Nachamish Gamzu, what's called Chayni Amagal. And we learned Nacham Amadi was during that time of the Beis HaMikdash, and it culminated in Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai led the Yidden through Churban Beis HaMikdash, and it was a time that they had to deal with the Romans, but unfortunately, not only dealing with the Romans was unpleasant, and there was many sad stories. There was the Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol with Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the Nasi who was killed, Al Kiddush Hashem, and they were part of the Asar Rugei Malchus. But besides that, there was also the Bar Yonim. They had to deal with the internal politics of the Yidden and the strife within Eretz Yisrael, within Yerushalayim, really. And it was very, very, very tricky. It was also a time that, although Machlokes just began, and suddenly there was Hillel and there was Shammai, which led to Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, but we don't know their names. We just know very few names of who was considered to be part of Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, and they were more like two groups. There was Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. There wasn't hundreds of different shittas and many different Batei Midrashim. We don't know so many names of who lived during that time, because there wasn't so many different shittas. Unfortunately, they argued, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argued many, many times, but it was a group, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Suddenly came the Churban Beis HaMikdash, and the Churban Beis HaMikdash, not only was the Churban Beis HaMikdash, the Beis HaMikdash left, and unfortunately we were kicked out of Yerushalayim, but right beforehand, we learned that Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai was able to sneak out, the Sanhedrin was able to sneak out the Olam HaTorah, and suddenly Torah was centered in Yavne. And Yavne became the place of Torah learning, and Yavne became the center of town, and that's where Klal Yisrael flourished, in Yavne. And we learned who was around during that time. We had Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanis, and Rabbi Yeshua ben Chanina. If we have a siddur, we have Chamisha Talmidim, Hayoloi, Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai, right? One of them is Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanis, one of them Rabbi Chanina Rabbi Eliezer ben Aroch, Rabbi Yeshua ben Chanina, Rabbi Eliezer ben Aroch, and Rabbi Yossi HaKohen. In the Mishnah over there, we have the Talmidim. In the first parak, we have the Talmidim of Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai, and that's who led Klal Yisrael initially right after the Churban. We had the difference of Rabbi Yeshua was much more passive. Rabbi Yeshua was the confidence and the equilibrium of Rabbi Yeshua, and the passion and the fire and the kanos of Rabbi Eliezer, who eventually had to be thrown into Cherem. And Rabbi Eliezer Shamutu, he was more like the Beis Shammai style, and that was Rabbi Eliezer. And then came the next generation of Rabbi Akiva. And with Rabbi Akiva, we have Reb Tarfon. We have, I don't have a siddur. Can you give me a siddur? We have Ma'aser B'Rabbi Elazar. No. If you look in the Haggadah, I have one here. I have one here. We have the Haggadah Shel Pesach. Well, let's just focus on the names. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva and Reb Tarfon and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and over there, which the Mefarshim ask, and we should really appreciate it, there's a very, very big hashmata. Where is Rabbi Gamliel in that story? Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi. Rabbi Gamliel was the person Again, Rabbi Gamliel, his father was Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, who was killed before the Churban, who was killed, and unfortunately there was a lack in a Nasi, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai took over. But then there was Rabbi Gamliel. And Rabbi Gamliel really was the king during that time. He was the Nasi. He led the Kerem de Yavne, because they would sit like a Kerem, and therefore it was called Kerem de Yavne. And he led the Beis Medrash in Yavne, and it was the golden era of where they were in Yavne. There was a lot going on. And we learned the internal politics with Rabbi Yeshua, the Rabbi Gamliel, the Rabbi Yeshua. There was some friction, and there was, they knocked Rabbi Gamliel out. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah was put in. Great. That we focused on. And now let's try to say one more important story that will end these 75 years, and then let's understand the political side of that 75 years. So again, during these 75 years, we're talking about the second era of the Tanam was 75 years, let's say. It was in Yavne. Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi, and we mentioned all those names. There was Rabbi Yishmael, there was Rabbi Tarfoin, there was Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, there was Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, who was really much younger, but became the Nasi then. Other names during that time, we should just be familiar with the names of the people during that time, and that was those 75 years. We also know that Rabbi Akiva, then there was Rabbi Akiva, there was Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri, Rabbi Yechon ben Harkinas, and that was the 75 years. We know Rabbi Akiva went and he had 24,000 Talmidim. He actually married the daughter of Ben Kaba Savua. Ben Kaba Savua was the one who was mentioned, who was the one supporting the Yidden right before the Churban. So he was the next generation after the Churban. Rabbi Akiva was alive during the Churban. Rabbi Akiva is walking back to Yerushalayim. Rabbi Akiva and all his Chaverim, and they see Shul Achas Yotzim Beis Kachei HaKadoshim. It was mamash right after the Churban, 50 years after the Churban, less than 50 years after the Churban. And that was the life of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva goes and he has 24,000 Talmidim, and the 24,000 Talmidim unfortunately all die, as we know, between Pesach and Shavuos, and therefore he now goes Eitzel Rabbi Selengut B'Darim, and he has his 5 Talmidim. His five Talmidim are, we're going to have to learn about, we're going to save that for the next 75 years, but these 5 Talmidim are going to really lead us into the next 75 years. Rabbi Yehuda, we're going to have to remember these names, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, Yeshem, Rabbi Nechemiah, and those are the 5 Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva that take over Klal Yisrael. Great. This seems like a golden era. Seems like an amazing time. Seems like life is great. However, unfortunately, there was the political world also. And again, it starts off with what was going on in the world. It starts off with Churban Beis Hamikdash, and with Vespasian was emperor during Churban Beis Hamikdash. Vespasian had his son Titus, who was the general. And the general, after he managed to conquer Jerusalem, it was like he was voted in to be the next emperor, and Titus became the next emperor. And then the Gemara says in Gittin how Titus died. There was a gnat, a little fly, a mosquito went into his brains, and whatever the case is, Titus died. It could be his brother took over, and he was assassinated. His brother also was a crazy person, and he was, and then another emperor. Finally came another emperor named Trajan. And Trajan is mentioned in the Gemara. Trajan is known as Tyrannus or Turnus Rupus Harasha. And Trajan decided, and this is very, very important to appreciate because this comes up in history, Trajan decided to expand the Roman Empire. Now let's remember, Rome is really a city in Italy, is in Europe, and they were expanding eastward into Asia, and it really stopped by, they had Turkey and Syria, and it went down and it had Israel, and next door was Parthia. Parthia is really Persia. It was just a different empire. It wasn't the Persian Empire, it was the Parthian Empire, and therefore it was Parsi, it was Babel. So Bavel was really run by the Parsium, was run by the Parthians. And the Parthians did not want the Romans. And Trajan decided that he's expanding the Roman Empire. And he pushed eastward. And the last thing that this Kehillah in Bavel wanted, all the Yidden, again, the Yidden are already in Bavel for 500 years, even more. They're there before already Golos Yechonia, now is Bavel. They were sent to Bavel already 17 years before Chorban Beis Hamikdash. They were sent to, not 11 years before Chorban Beis Hamikdash. They were sent to Bavel and already Golos Yechonia, right? The Gemara talks about the Yena Beis Medrash and the Hardoi, the Shafi Yosef, that they schlepped along, Kirotzu Avodeha Es Avaneha, that the Avodim, they took along Pasha the Beis Medrash of them in Eretz Yisrael, and they settled it in Bavel, and there was a Kehillah in Bavel, and they were always going. Hillel, we learned. Hillel Habavli, he was really from Bavel, he came along. There was always a thriving Beis Medrash, a thriving place in Bavel, even when they were Kaiver Reish Chodesh, the Gemara in Shabbos, the Mishnah in Shabbos says that they had to tell everyone in Bavel, right? Asherel Kol HaGoyla Kemedura Sa'eshim Pumpadisa. It was cracking in Bavel. Bavel was cracking, but the center was Eretz Yisrael. Now the Parthians did not want the Romans to show up, and the Romans were pushing east, and the Yidden helped the Parthians defeat the Romans, and the Romans had very, very, very difficult time conquering Persia, conquering the Parthian Empire, and they couldn't get to the Parthian Empire, and they blamed it a lot on the Yidden. I mean, but they were right, and therefore the Yidden now were on the bad side of the Romans. Not only were they the bad side of the Romans, they were on the bad side of the general Roman population. They now despise Yidden. Their great empire was supposed to expand further. Their great empire was supposed to go east and take over Parthia, and because of these Jews, they can't. And it was a very, very big kitrug, and Kehillos in Klal Yisrael were destroyed, and it was a very, very sad time for Klal Yisrael. Alexandria Sheba Mitzrayim in Mitzrayim was also Roman, and they also came and they killed the Yidden there. And in Bava they were killing Yidden, and in Yisrael they were killing Yidden, and they were killing because they had a personal animosity. They just didn't like the fact that,
Riots?
I don't know. Kehillos were destroyed. Alexander Mitzrayim at different times. It was a tricky time for Klal Yisrael, but it wasn't necessarily against the Torah and against the Yidden. They were just not being patriotic to the Roman neighbors, and therefore it was not a good time. Okay, Trajan dies. Actually, the Gemara in Tainus tells us the end. Maybe the Gemara says exactly how Turinus was killed. The Gemara says there was Harugei Lud. The Gemara says Harugei Lud. The people who killed in Lud, Ein Kol Adam Yochel Amad B'Mechitzasan, and their chelik in Gan Eden, no one could even come close. They were the people, and a Roman girl was found killed, and they decided that it was someone from this town, and they came and they said, if you don't tell us who it is, we're going to kill everyone in this town. And it just gives us a feeling of like the intimidation they were living with. And these two people from Lud, these two tzaddikim, Rashi goes on tzaddikim gemurim, they came out and they said, we're the ones who killed. Of course it wasn't true, and everyone really knew it wasn't true, but they set them up and they said, okay, so we're going to kill you. And Turinus is over there ready to kill them. And Turinus goes and says, yeah, let me see your God do a nace like he did to Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah by Nebuchadnezzar. And they get up there with a stolz and they say, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, we're tzaddikim, we're not tzaddikim. But Nebuchadnezzar was already a melech hagun. You're a nice farf. Hashem want to do a nace for you. And he killed them, and Loizaz Misham, he couldn't even leave from there until suddenly some of his own men came and assassinated him. And maybe it was Turinus, maybe it was Trajan, maybe it was one of his executioners, whatever the case is, but the Imam was able to see the Nakama right then. Out with Trajan, and now comes a new emperor, and his name is Hadrian. Hadrian is Andrianus Caesar, and Hadrian comes and he realizes that Rome is starting to become splintered, and Rome is starting to become they're battle weary. They're just like they're done. So he goes and he gives up all the land they conquered in Parthia, and he decides to make a campaign of Roman pride, of nationalism, of condensing the kingdom and making it strong and fortifying the kingdom within, rather than just conquering so much more. And that was Hadrian's things. And initially, Hadrian was very good to the Yidden, but then he got stuck. and almost like the Yevanim. Like, why are these Yidden being such stubborn guys? We're trying to make a Roman atmosphere. We're trying to make everyone Roman. Let's just back up a moment. What do I mean Roman? Roman is the theaters and the circuses, right? Elu Tartuyos, the Karkishos, as theaters, it's almost the same words, theaters and circuses, and gladiators and coliseums, and they were keeping everyone busy with the Roman, the bread and the circus, right? As I said, the bread and the circus just keep everyone fed and stuffed and entertained and just like out of mind, out of sight. And they had this whole Roman culture to let the Romans just poison everyone with their Narishkeiten, with all their fakerai. And these Jews are stuck on their tradition, and he went on a campaign to go break the Jews. We gotta make the Jews Roman, almost like what happened by the Yevanim. They were out to change the culture, the Jewish culture, and the Yidden are an Am Kshei Orif, and they said, we're not going nowhere. And unfortunately, Hadrian Andrionis created what's known as the Dar Hashmad. And this is really the Dar of Rabbi Akiva. And this is the Dar of what was going on then. He made Gezeris. And he made Gezeris, this is maybe 50 years after the Churban. And he made Gezeris that there's no Bris Milah, and no Rosh Chodesh, and no Limud Torah, and no anything, and nothing. And he pulled Torah away. And it was a very difficult time. Now, you can't even imagine the threat. I mean, Khalila, someone is like pulled, he's thrown into jail. What do you think happened in jail? If he's lucky, he died in jail. If he's lucky, maybe he would get killed like this. Otherwise, he'd be thrown into a gladiators with the Coliseum with 50,000 people watching as he's there, given a spear to go fight this gladiator, to go fight a lion or a bear, and get ripped up in front of everyone. The threat, the disgusting, the bizarreness, the unbelievable. It wasn't only the death. I mean, maybe he would get killed before, but the terrible Roman culture, along with this the Gezeris, and they had so no chashivas for human life. It was terrible, mamish terrible times. And Rabbi Akiva was there, mako kilus barabim, and he says, I don't really care, under their noses, and they're going to do it. That was an incredible thing. But Torah, in a big sense, had to go underground, and Torah had to hide itself. And Torah, almost like by the Yevanim, there were little places of Torah going all around, and they were still learning Torah, and they were stark. And they would say, "Why are you getting killed? I'm getting killed, Memnei Shemalas B'ni." Right? And why are you getting killed? I'm getting killed because I was caught learning Torah. And why are you getting killed? Because I was doing this. And it was like, okay, one after the next, they were just getting killed at terrible times of Hadrian, Andrionis, Caesar, and suddenly came this person, Bar Kokhba. And Bar Kokhba was a very, very powerful person. And he was able, with a charisma, with a power, with a stolz, and the tactics, he was able to connect all these underground worlds. And he got them all together. And he made a network of all these places. And he was machazik them. And he was mamish, as Rabbi Akiva thought he was Mashiach. He managed, under the nose of the Romans, to give such chizik and to bring everyone together and to give everyone a focus and a unity and the power of the rabbim. It was an amazing thing. And Rabbi Akiva felt Bar Kokhba was Mashiach, and he would run in front of him, and he felt that this was the Melech HaMashiach, and Bar Kokhba really based himself in Beitar, and Beitar became a strong, fortified city, and it was a Knakadika city. It was cooking and learning, and he organized enough of a battle and enough of a war that Hadrian just didn't want to start up. It was too much energy to start up with Beitar. And here you have, under the nose of the Romans, Bar Kokhba is this king, mamash a king. He has Rabbi Akiva's haskama to him. He organized such an army that Hadrian just didn't want to start up with them. And under the Hadrian rule, you have this amazing place of Beitar. And in general, the whole Bar Kokhba was weakening the whole Hadrian passion of getting rid of this Yiddish Yiddish present, and he just couldn't win. He couldn't win. And Hadrian called up legions and legions and legions of his battles, and finally he decided, by hook or by crook, we're getting Beitar. And the amount of soldiers, it was more than he used to conquer Yerushalayim. He needed to conquer Beitar. They were very, very, very strong. And Bar Kokhba himself realized his end, and he started already his corroded insides came out, and from Bar Kokhba, Rabbi Akiva withdrew his support, and he was known as Bar Kuziba, the fake one, and that's it. Bar Kokhba realized he was not Mashiach, and Bar Kokhba still held on, and eventually he killed his uncle, and he started going against the Chachamim, and the Chachamim realized that this is not the right thing, but still, Beitar was knocking, and the Romans, I think that in Roman things, there were certain legions that was simply wiped out, trying to kill out Beitar, but with enough persistence, unfortunately, the Romans managed to kill out Beitar, and Churban Beitar happened on Tisha B'Av. That was one of the 5 things that happened on Tisha B'Av. And they were so, the animosity, the hatred to Beitar, it was like, it was the last holdout that he just could not win. They refused to let the bodies be buried, right? As we know, on that they were masakin Hatov HaMeitiv. It's an unbelievable thing that we don't know much about Beitar. We know Gemara in Gittin says a little bit about Beitar, and it says like staggering numbers of what was going on in Beitar, how many Batei Knesiyos, and again, this is in the Hadrian rule, this is going on. How many Batei Knesiyos, and the thousands, the millions of people that were in Beitar. It's incredible what was going on in Beitar. And Klal Yisrael unfortunately lost Beitar, and that was the time of the Hadrian. Also during the time of the Hadrian period was so much of the Asara Ruge Malchus came during this Hadrian period. We know Rabbi Akiva was captured, and that was such a blow to Klal Yisrael. Rabbi Akiva was Kodesh Kadoshim. We can't imagine who Rabbi Akiva was. Rabbi Akiva made Moshe Rabbeinu jealous. Rabbi Akiva was the Derish Kol Tag, and he is killed, and he could be in prison, and he was in prison, and he tried to be machazik everyone from prison until they finally came and they killed him. We know they combed his body by Masrekah Shel Barzel, and his Talmidim, the 5 Talmidim that he taught, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yosi, he didn't even manage to give them smicha. He did give them smicha. He didn't give them smicha. Whatever case is, the smicha wasn't good, and they made a whole thing that the Romans said, we're not going to have any more smicha. And they were out to kill everyone with smicha. And if they could just sever the chain of smicha, then they severed it forever, right? What's smicha? Smicha is literally Meirav L'Talmud all the way to Moshe Rabbeinu. So they killed out anyone with smicha. And they said, if we're going to find someone who has smicha, if we're going to find anyone who's going to give smicha, we're going to kill not only the person who gives a smicha and the one who gets a smicha, we're going to kill the whole entire city and the whole tchum of the city, so that everyone will be threatened that nobody will ever pass on smicha, and let's just keep this going for a number of years, and then the whole smicha is over. And the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva never got smicha, or never got an official smicha from Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva was killed. And they went to Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava went to a place that wasn't near the tchum of any city, out in the forest, out on the rocks over there, and he went and he gave them smicha, and then the Romans heard. He gave them smicha, and then the Romans heard, so they couldn't kill the whole city, they couldn't kill the tchum, because he did it outside of everything, and the Romans showed up, and they said, Rebbe, we're going to stay with you. He goes, no, quickly run, so at least smicha will remain. They said, but what's going to happen? He goes, what should I do? My days are numbered. It's done. And they couldn't wait to kill him, and they put shalish meish chitzim, 300 the arrows through him, and they turned his body into a kvara, a sifter. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Dam is one of the Asar Ruga Malchus. Rabbi Chutzpah HaMatorgman, Rabbi Chutzpah HaMatorgman was the Matorgman in the days of Rabbi Gamliel, that they said, Matorgman, stop talking, as Rabbi Gamliel is going, and Rabbi Yeshua, and the whole thing going on was Rabbi Chutzpah HaMatorgman. And most of the Asar Ruga Malchus, another one is Rabbi Chanina ben Teradian, who is the father-in-law of Rabbi Meir. Again, Rabbi Meir is the Talmud of Rabbi Akiva. It's all this generation, unfortunately, that there was Nebuch the Dor Hashmad, a terrible, terrible, terrible time. The Sanhedrin was stopped. The whole Jewish life, unfortunately, came to a stop, and that was the Hadrian rule of Andrianus Caesar. And Hadrian dies, and comes the next Roman emperor, Antoninus Pius, which I don't know what he's called in the days of. I don't know, he's a Caesar. I don't know the name that Antoninus Pius had, and he was a middle ground. On one hand, he realized we're not getting the Yidden. We're not getting the Yidden. He came and he tried to make a little friends. He said you could bury everyone in Beitar, and that's Tuba, they were able to bury everyone in Beitar, and that really begins the next 75 years. So, this is now we're ready to begin the third
75.
The third era. The last 75 years of the days of third era, 75 years, and now Torah is shifted out of Yavne now into the northern part of Eretz Yisrael, north of Eretz Yisrael, in Tiberia, in Sipori, in Shafram, forgot the other place. Okay. Shafram, base. Okay, I forgot.
Hold on.
No. Whatever. All over there. All over there they were all over there. That's fast. That whole area. That's where now the Sanhedrin is. And no. Okay. Anyways, that's where they are. And who takes over now? We have. No. That's it. No. So now we have Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, and the famous story that Rabbi Shimon, it was a tricky time because Antoninus Pius still had still had all these gezeros in effect, that they're not allowed to do this, they're not allowed to do that, they're not allowed to do anything, but he didn't enforce them. So whenever he wanted to pull out the joker to get them, he had all the power in his hands. He wasn't enforcing it, but the laws were still in place that they couldn't do all of these things, and it was a very, very tricky thing. Finally, they decided to send Reb Shimon. So let's try to appreciate the five Talmidim. So we have over here Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, or Yeshem and Rabbi Nechemiah. Okay, so now we have the five Talmidim, and Rabbi Shimon was sent to go be Mavatal the Gezerah. And who does Reb Shimon? He stops on the way, and who does he meet? He meets a shade, and he's like, "Oh, Gavalt, the shade is the one who's here to help me." But he had Siyata Yishmaya, and we're going to learn that Reb Shimon was a Zayar. Reb Shimon goes and he comes to the Kesar, and the Kesar says, "What should I do? My daughter has been chapped by this shade. She's out of her mind. She lost herself." He said, "Oh, no problem, I'll take it." And he called out the shade, and the shade left. And then the Kesar was so excited, was so appreciative, that he said, go to the Beis Kenozai and take whatever you want. He ran to the Beis Kenozai, he found the Gezeris, he ripped them up, because that's all I want, done. So we could get rid of the Gezeris, and that's officially how the Gezeris ended in the days of Reb Shimon, Reb Yehuda, Reb Yossi, Reb Meir. But it was very, very, very tricky times. It wasn't a time to be comfortable. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel is Nasi now. Reb Gamliel died. Reb Gamliel died already before. Reb Gamliel died with the whole story with Reb Eliezer and his sister-in-law, his sister, who was Reb Gamliel's wife, and Reb Shimon. So let's try to focus now on Reb Shimon, Reb Yehuda, Reb Yossi. Such a beautiful Gemara. It really tells us the personalities of Reb Yehuda and Reb Shimon, to appreciate the Reb Yehuda and the Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon was fire. Reb Shimon was kanos. Reb Shimon was, and then you have Reb Yehuda. Reb Yehuda was so calm. Rabbi Yehuda was poor, right? Talmidei Rabbi Yehuda, yet Shisha Miskaseh Talis Echad. They were very, very poor. Rabbi Yehuda everything was fine. Everything was fine. The Gemara says he didn't want to eat the dates because they're hard on his stomach, and then the mamash he can't eat for a few days. So Rabbi Yehuda, the Gemara Nadarm. So Rabbi Yehuda Gishmak. If I eat these dates, I don't have to eat for a few days. Let me eat these dates. I don't have to think of food for the next few days. That was Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, everything worked. The best Gemara, the Gemara comes, and the Gemara says that a certain person, he's told his wife made him not good food, and he goes and he eats it, and he says, this, disgusting food, go give it to the Chacham. And she walks to the Chacham Nebuch with her pot of supper, and she goes, here, my husband said I can't come back home until I give it to the Chacham. Zok Rabbi Yehuda, Uma Shem Shemayim, Hashem says, Yimoch al Shmi v'Shalom Bayis. So Yehuda Allah Chaskama v'Kama, give me a piece, I'll eat it. Reb Shimon says, Yamuzu Kopnei Almanav Al Yozu Shimon and Kaimai. No way, chutzpah. I'm gonna. The stolz of Reb Shimon and the calmness of Reb Yehuda. And we have many different stories of Reb Yehuda was always accepting, and then you had Reb Shimon who was on fire, and that really brings out the most famous story, and that is when they were talking about the Romans. They said, "Man no umazu, how great is this nation of the Romans?" And Rabbi Yehuda was praising the Romans. They said, "Lamaisa, you got to appreciate. There's internet, there's bridges, there's a police department and a fire department, and there's so much we have to appreciate." And Zok Reb Shimon, Rabbi Yossi is shosak. Rabbi Yossi is quiet, and Reb Shimon gets up and he goes, "No way, Komasha also whatever they did." And Reb Shimon is the fire of Reb Shimon, and right, Yehuda ben Gerim was there, and eventually because of him it was heard to the Malchus. Zok the Malchus, Rabbi Yossi is Galul Tzipari, and incredible on all the stories of what happened. They were not in Tzipari; they were in Tzipari, but the Sanhedrin was never in Tzipari. I'm missing Halach Acha Rebbe Lebeis. Yeah, neither one. I forgot. Anyways, it was in Tveria, in Shafram, and in the other place. I apologize, I don't remember. And Rabbi Yossi is never there because Rabbi Yossi was stuck. He was on house arrest in Tzipari, and therefore he was stuck in Tzipari. He had his own yeshiva in Tzipari. He was being Marbet Torah in Tzipari, but with the Chachamim, Rabbi Yossi was not with the Chachamim. And Rabbi Yehuda became the Rosh HaMedaber B'chol Mokim, which some explain, Rosh HaMedaber B'chol Mokim, the Romans made him the Rosh HaMedaber B'chol Mokim, was actually a very, very, very big bracha, because the Gemara calls him Rosh HaMedaber B'chol Mokim. Just because the Romans praised him and was happy with him, why should the Chachamim shtelzu that every time there was something, so Rabbi Yehuda would get up there and become, the Rosh HaMedaber. Like, who really cares? Why is Rabbi Yehuda known as the Rosh HaMedaber B'chol Mokim? And some say because Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was the Nasi. He was Gamliel's son. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the Romans didn't want him to be a Nasi. And it was tricky. So they kept him as the Nasi, but they gave him very little power, and they made sure he wasn't too active. And then suddenly came this Rabbi Yehuda. He's a big rabbi, and he loves the Romans. Make him the Rosh HaMedaber B'chol Mokim, but he couldn't be Nasi. So Rabbi Yehuda filled in for that role of Nasi, and Rabbi Yehuda became the Rosh HaMedaber, and he really led Klal Yisrael, and the patience and the outlook of how Rabbi Yehuda approached everything was actually favorable for the Yidden, because now the Romans had someone that they felt was on his side, and that was Rabbi Yehuda. And we know Reb Shimon ended up in the Ma'ara, and he came out 13 years later as the Zoyar. He came out like a fire. You can't imagine who Reb Shimon is. And this is Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai is Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, Reb Yehuda Bar Beloi, Reb Yosef ben Chalafta, and Reb Meir. Reb Meir was Reb Meir Baal Nes. The famous Gemara, how was he known as Reb Meir Baal Nes? Because Reb Meir, his wife said, his wife was Broya, Eshes Reb Meir, and the daughter of Reb Chanina ben Teradyon, and her sisters were captured by the Romans, and therefore they were put in the Kuba Shel Zaynais, and he went to go save them. And remember the Gemara of Zar, he went to go save them, and he went over to the guard and said, here's some money. And the guard said, it doesn't help me money. You're going to want to know, where are all these girls? He said, okay, so this is money for you, and then bribe the other people. So here's take more money. He goes, good, so this for me, and this is when I bribe them. But eventually I'm going to use up all the money, and they're going to want more money. I'm not going to bribe them enough. So he said, okay, here, watch this. Whenever they come, just say, El Kadam Meir Arneni, and you're going to be saved. He goes, what, if I say El Kadam Meir Arneni, nothing's going to happen? He says, yeah, You say L'Kodem Meir Arneni, you're not going to get punished. He goes, I don't believe you. He said here, and he takes a shackle, he takes some dirt, and he throws it at some wild dogs, and the wild dogs come huffing and puffing and chasing them, and as it goes, L'Kodem Meir Arneni, and the dogs stop. Because you see, L'Kodem Meir Arneni works. He goes, okay, no problem, give me all the money, and now I have the safe of a L'Kodem Meir Arneni, and he has it, a L'Kodem Meir Arneni, and he lets them go, and Rameir's happy that he got his sister-in-laws out, and they catch his guard, and they want to kill the guard, and they take him, and they're ready to kill him, and the second before they're ready to kill him, he goes, L'Kodem Meir Arneni, and suddenly they weren't able to kill him. I don't know whatever happened, a commotion, I don't know, maybe the noose cracked, I'll catch Rameir, and they couldn't kill him. Okay, so they set the execution date another time, and they're about to kill him, and he screams, L'Kodem Meir Arneni. Done. They can't kill him. It happens again. Finally, they say, okay, we got the hint. There's some trick here. Maybe explain to me what's going on. So he says, I'll tell you. This rabbi, Rabbi Meir, came and he told him the whole story. He says, aha, okay, so good. So we can't kill you because it's not going to work. But let's go get Rabbi Meir. And therefore they printed coins with Rabbi Meir's name. The Gemara says, they printed coins with Rabbi Meir's image, and they were looking for Rabbi Meir. They wanted to chap Rabbi Meir. And finally someone knew the coin and saw Rabbi Meir. So he ran over, he said, oh, I got him. And Rabbi Meir chapped, they're about to catch him. Unbelievable, there's no... In kindergarten we know this trick. And Rabbi Meir ran over to treif, and he stuck his finger into the treif with one finger and licked the other finger. And it looked like he was eating the treif. The guy goes, oh, the Heilige Rabbi Meir, he can't be eating treif. Must not be Rabbi Meir. And then Rabbi Meir said, obviously things are scary, and Rabbi Meir had to run away. But Rabbi Meir was known as Rabbi Meir Baal Nes. He was a Baal Maisim. Rabbi Meir was Or. The Tairosish Rabbi Meir, Hayakasav Kosnes Or with an Aleph. Rabbi Meir was a Meir La'ilam V'Adar Maleho. And Rabbi Meir was pure light. Rabbi Meir was living on a different sphere. Rabbi Meir was a cipher, and Rabbi Meir was a different world. And then we have Rabbi Elazar ben Shamuel. Rabbi Elazar ben Shamuel eventually was also one of the Asar Arugei Malchus, and Rabbi Elazar ben Shamuel was also the 5 Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, and they really brought back the Torah. And we should appreciate that they brought back the Torah, and the Gemara says, Stam Safra... I don't remember. Stam Asnisin is Rabbi Meir, and Stam this is Rabbi Yossi, and Stam this is Rabbi Shimon, and Stam all the Stam the Kula Aliba de Rabbi Akiva, all according to Rabbi Akiva. Their Rabbi is all Aliba de Rabbi Akiva. Our Torah that we have is mamash. Every Mishnah, everything is Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. These are the Iker Mishnayos, and they are in the days of Antoninus Pius, and all of them had a student who he learned by all of them, and that was Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was a Talmud of all of them. Although he learned by Rabbi Meir, the Gemara says he learned by Rabbi Meir, and he says, only because I saw Rabbi Meir me'achayrai, had I seen in the front, maybe he said in the back of him by Rashir, there's a Yerushalmi that says an unbelievable story. How did Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi see Rabbi Meir me'achayrai? Because Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was walking home on Shabbos, and he heard that they were clapping. I remember seeing this Maisa, and I tried to find it again, I couldn't find it, but I remember seeing it. And if I recall, Taisus brought it down somewhere. And they were all clapping because there was so Rabbeinu HaKadosh said, Vasais, they're clapping on Shabbos, you're not allowed to clap, there's an Issa, so he walked in, they said, no, it's a Sheva Brachos. So Mishum Kavod Chasam Akala, they're still arguing about this today. So Mishum Kavod Chasam Akala, we are allowed to clap. He said, even Chasam, you're not allowed to clap. They said, no, Ikar Rabbi Meir sitting by here. He goes, oh, if it's Rabbi Meir, I'm not. Rabbi Meir sees there's a commotion by the door. What's going on? He said, what's going on? He says, Rabbeinu HaKadosh came. He said, Rabbeinu HaKadosh is here. And he runs to go find Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Rabbeinu HaKadosh runs away. He doesn't want to stare if Rabbi Meir's there. Rabbi Meir's trying to... No, I'm sorry. Rabbi Yehuda was inside. Rabbi Meir was walking by. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was there. And he holds Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's inside. I don't want to stare. So Rabbi Meir walks away. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, Rabbi Meir's here. Oh, you have to go run to Rabbi Meir. And he's chasing Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir's running away. And he saw Rabbi Meir me'achayrai. And only if I would have seen Rabbi Meir in the face-to-face, there would have been so much more. That's how the or, we're trying to focus on the or of Rabbi Meir, the light of Rabbi Meir, the kedusha of Rabbi Meir. So we have Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Meir, and then they have Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbeinu HaKadosh is the one who ends the Tanom. Now let's appreciate the Gemara in Kedushin. The Gemara in Kedushin says, B'yoyim shemeis Rabbi Akiva's noiled Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. So what does that mean? When did Rabbi Akiva die? Rabbi Akiva died in the schmaltz, in the heat of the Hadrian period. It was a terrible, terrible time Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was born. And that's the story of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, and this really brings the whole life of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi comes from this story. It was a time that you're not allowed to be mal your child. It was a time that every single person was being killed for whatever reason. And the Heilige Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, he's the Nasi, he has a child, and he's going to be mal his child. And the Romans hear that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, the Nasi, the one that, they let him live, but they try to take away the Nasi's from him, he now has a child, and he's mal his own child. That's it, we got to get him. And they schlep him down, right? We know the famous story, right? Tysus brings it down. And as they're going down, they stay in the inn by some Roman senator, and it was Antoninus. Anthony, Marcus, who the Gemara calls Antoninus, who's the next emperor after Antoninus Pius. And therefore he's coming down, and the mother feels terrible. And she also had a child, right? The famous story. And they switched to babies. And Reb Shimon ben Gamliel brings down this Roman child to show the emperor that he didn't give a bris milah. And meanwhile, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi is now staying in this Roman senator's house. And because he drank the milk of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi's mother, therefore he had such an affinity for the Yidden. He loved the Yidden, and it's going to serve so much for Klal Yisrael at that time. Right? We know they showed the child did not have a bris milah. It was really the Roman child, and therefore they killed that person who mastered, and then they came and they switched, and forever these two babies turned out to be great friends. One became Antoninus, the Roman Caesar, and one became Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. Again, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi started in the hard Hadrian period, and eventually Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi became the Heilige Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was in a different world. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, we can't even imagine who Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi is with Eliyahu Hanavi. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi is like Chaim Mesim. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi is in a different world. Kodesh Kadoshim Mamish. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, he was known as Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He didn't put his hand down, right, lower than his waist. The stories of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Rabbeinu HaKadosh is a different sphere of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He was the richest person. He was the most Kaddish person. He was an unbelievable Talmud Chacham. And the Eibusher Gefeiert, he also lived during the most benevolent Roman emperor that yet had come, and that was Antoninus. And Antoninus had a fascination with Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and he became a Roman emperor, and he was a very, very benevolent emperor, and he could not get over Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and he spoke to him in wisdom, and he spoke to him in this, and he was enamored with Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Now we learned that he was in Tiberia, and he was in Caesarea, and he built a tunnel. Or maybe he was actually in Tveria, and he built a tunnel from Rabbeinu HaKadosh's house to his palace. And right, we know the Gemara of Avodah Zarah that he would come by every single time. He would come by to learn by him through the tunnel, and he brought 2 guards with him because he shouldn't go without a guard. And he would come with 1 guard. He would kill 1 guard before he went to Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, and then the other guard would stay. And as he would come back home, he would kill the other guard, and then he could come back up. And therefore, every day he would kill 2 guards to go learn with Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, just to appreciate what was going on during that time. Right, the famous mice, we all know it, that he comes and he says, just make sure no one talks, no one's here. So fine. One time he's coming, and who was it? Reb Chanina Bar Chama was there learning with Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and Antoninus walks in and goes, "Oi, what's this guy doing here?" He says, "Him, let's bar Inish. He's not a person." He said, "Yeah, if he's not a person, go get me that guard," meaning the guard he just killed. There's another guard I left over there. Go bring him. So he oblivion goes and says, "Okay, I'll go get the guard." He goes and he finds his guard is dead. So he says, "What should I do? Should I come back and say he's dead? You don't come back with bad news. Should I run away? It's not covered of a malchus to run away and just not give him back the answer. So he's Machai Mesim, and he makes the guard, and he walks in with the dead guard, and now the guard's alive, and he walks in with the guard. So Antinina sees this and goes, oh, I know of you. Even the smallest of you are Machai Mesim, but do me a favor. Don't bring anyone. I don't want anyone here. No one. Okay, good. So Antinina's got it. But Antinina would send Rabbeinu HaKadosh questions, and he would send them in riddles. And the Gemara says, why send them in riddles? The answer is because he was worried for his own people. First of all the Romans were bloodthirsty. They would just kill the emperor himself, and every emperor had to watch out. This emperor had shaykhs to Rabbi Yehuda. Nasi was unpleasant, but we have to get to it in a moment. I don't want to get to it now. But this Roman emperor Antoninus changed the Roman style. The Roman style was tough. The Roman style was that they would find the next king. They would appoint an heir to the throne. It wasn't just their son, and he was more benevolent. His son could do the job, and things were calm, and things were nice, and it gave a major respite. It turned out in the long run, it was not so great for the Yidden, as we have to get to, but it was an unbelievable time. So you have the Heilige Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the Talmud Chacham, the richest, the most respected person, someone who's unbelievable, zero from himself, and the Romans were on their side, and he gathered all the Chacham together. And until then, at least according to the Rambam, Teresh B'Ksav was not written down ki huzeh. Maybe they had little Megillah Starim, and he compiled them Mishnayos with all the Chachamim, with all the Romans helping him with whatever he needed. He had all the money to do it, and all the political savviness to do it. Everything was fine, and he was able to do the impossible of organizing the Mishnayos. And let's just appreciate what Mishnayos is. Mishnayos means, if let's say you have somebody says, in the past 100 years, there's hundreds of psukim. I'm going to make the ultimate sefer of all the psukim. So you have all the Chazon Ish and the Rameshas and Dayan Weiss with Reb Shlomo Zalman, and you have who knows who you have. And everyone's going to argue. He's going to say, no, the Chazon Ish said like that. He's going to say, no, the Chazon Ish said like that. And one time the Chazon Ish went this way. So I don't know. How do you know what did the Chazon Ish say? The answer is, Reb Chaim Kanevsky says that this is what the Chazon Ish says, and this is what my father did because what the Chazon Ish said. So this is what the Chazon Ish did. So he took all the different shittas that we have from Rabbi Akiva and Reb Shimon and Reb Meir and all the Tanam, and he put it together and was mavara and malabed, and it all stimmed. And he wrote the Seder Mishnayos, and he was able to collect everything, and he put it into the Seder Mishnayos. Beforehand, everyone had a little Megillah Starim. The Gemara says, Matzah Megillah Starim. They had little notes of what they would say. This happened, that happened. They would have little notes, but it wasn't collected, and it wasn't proofread, and it wasn't authenticated. And Rabbeinu HaKadosh, putting it all together with everyone there, managed to all put it together. Incredible. But he left out tons of stuff. Tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff, which are the brises. And his Talmud, Reb Chia, and Reb Chia's Talmud Chaver, Reb Oishia, was Masada the brises. And they were Masada the brises. The Gemara in Ksubas is not even sure who was nifta first, Reb Chia or Reb Oishia, or Reb Chia or Rabbeinu HaKadosh. And the Gemara comes out, probably Reb Chia was nifta after Rabbeinu HaKadosh, but Reb Chia was Masada the brises, and he got all the brises. And just to appreciate what the brises are, just to appreciate what the Mishnayos is, just to appreciate the Mishnayos and the brises, let's just understand the following story. I think the story in Gemara and Tainus says it all. Mamash says it all. And that is, the Gemara says, this is like 50 years later, that there was two Amoraim, Rabbi Yochanan and Ilfa. Rabbi Yochanan and Ilfa, the Chikol Shaita, they were very, very starving. The Mamash did not have a penny, and they decided, Atkan, learning Torah is the best of schayra, but it doesn't pay the bills. And they got to go make some money. So they head off, they leave the Beis Medrash with a heavy heart, and they say, we are going to make some money. And they go make money. And they're on the way, and they're sitting, and they eat some bread, and they eat their lunch, leaning next to a wall. And suddenly they hear two malachim. Two malachim are talking. And one malach says, let's push down the wall, because there's people, we're going to push down the wall. Well, how do they live in the Beis Medrash to go make a living? So the Olam Malach says, no, we can't. One of them are supposed to be the Rosh Yeshiva. We can't kill them. So he says, okay. He says, hold on, Ilfa. Rabbi Yechon heard this. Ilfa, did you hear this conversation? He says, no, I didn't hear any conversation. What are we talking about? He goes, since I heard this conversation and Ilfa didn't hear the conversation, Shema Mino, then I'm supposed to become the Rosh Yeshiva and Ilfa not. He tells Ilfa, I'm going back to Beis Medrash. Rabbi Yechon gets up, goes back to Beis Medrash. Ilfa goes out and becomes a wealthy person. Okay, becomes a wealthy person. He comes back and he sees his friend Rabbi Yechon became a great Rosh Yeshiva, mit Kovid, and Rabbi Yechon, right? When someone becomes a Rosh Yeshiva, so Kohen Hagadol Me'achiv, right? Gadleu Mishalo, you have to make him rich. So suddenly Rabbi Yechon has all the money he needs, and Rabbi Yechon has unbelievable. We have to get to Rabbi Yechon, the king Rabbi Yechon, the unbelievable Rabbi Yechon, and the Heilige Rabbi Yechon now becomes a shining star, and Elfa becomes a businessman. And he walks in, and they start making fun of Elfa. If you would have stayed in Beis Medrash, can you imagine what you could have become? Look, Rabbi Yechon turned around, and you Elfa, you didn't turn around. So Elfa gets up and he goes, no problem, and he climbs up to the top of a ship, to the big mast of the ship, and he says, whoever could find me a brisa that's nishus be'Reb Chira Rabbeisha, an authenticated brisa, a real brisa that was certified and written down by Reb Chira Rabbeisha, and I can't find you where it's hinted to in the Mishnayos, I'm falling off the ship and I am going to die. And also Saba, and they try to find them brises. They try to find them brises that Rabbeinu HaKadosh never hinted to ki huzeh in the Mishnayos, and he's able to answer it. He's able to answer it. So good. Part of the story is just to see Ilfa, the ga'inus of Ilfa, which is the famous shtickle from, I forgot who was also a Baal Machabas Farm, a very famous, who was also a rich businessman, and he said there are two different. Suli Bernstein says this over. There's two different Talmid Chacham. There's the Talmid Chacham with the kapota and the up hat and the long white beard, and there's the Talmid Chacham who's saying a great stuff Yomi, who's a Baki B'Shasu Paiskin, and the guy's a millionaire also, and the guy's a businessman, and he's kaveh eating many hours a day, and he's knocking. So there's the Ilfa Talmid Chacham, there's the Rabbi Yechon, there's also the Ilfa Talmid Chacham, the Ilfa Gadol Adar. Okay, good. So that was beautiful to know about Ilfa. But what do we see about Mishnayos? Rabbeinu HaKadosh left out so much from Mishnayos. So much from Mishnayos. All the brises, but you're not going to find one brisa that wasn't included in the Mishnayos. So we see with the grace of diak of what Rabbeinu HaKadosh did. I want to say the same thing now from the other side. How did Rabbeinu HaKadosh write so many thousands of halachas that he never hinted to? The answer is, he wrote the Mishnayos. First of all, Rabbeinu HaKadosh wrote the Mishnayos in such beautiful English, such beautiful Hebrew. Simple, easy Hebrew. Such easy Hebrew. It's almost like the Rambam. The Rambam like put everything together and wrote it in fluent, easy to understand, flowing Hebrew that just is so geschmack to read, bedavka, and he organized it. The Rambam like almost copied Rabbeinu HaKadosh in organizing the Torah, but he did it with such precision, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, that you could make 1,000,000 diyukim and get to 1,000, 1,000,000 different prices by uncovering the nuances, the little hints, the subtle hints that Rabbeinu HaKadosh wrote in the Mishnayos, and that's really the job of the Gemara. The Gemara says, hold on. From this word of the Mishnah, we see this way. From that word of the Mishnah, we say, Hamani Reb Meir. Come on, Hamani Reb Meir. That's right. Yes, Rabbeinu HaKadosh had an unbelievable job. He was writing Mishnayos that flowed well, was understandable, geschmack, and everything. But he was hiding in there Tilim Sha'alachas. You have to be Darish called Tag V'Tag to see how come in this Gemara he decided to talk about a tzayin and he's not talking about a shar. Michti B'Shar Koskino, Maishno Denokat tzayin. Oh, he's referring to Brisa that Arbo Dvarim Shatayr Me'ato B'Shem Yirasan. Or how come he wrote the Mishnah in this case? Hochamayaskinon and Hochamayaskinon. Why did Rabbeinu HaKadosh write it? Because Rabbeinu wrote it so clear, so easy, but he hinted hundreds and thousands of brises. Ilfa was willing to say, you'll never find me a brisa that I can't unravel and find a Mishnah that you could be medayik that way. And that was Echad Mini Elef of the Ga'inus of the power of what Rabbeinu HaKadosh did. And he managed to put everyone together, and he had his own Beis Medrash. The Gemara says, Holach Achar Rebbe L'Tveria, Holach Achar Rebbe L'Shafram. I still can't remember the other place. And Holach Achar Rebbe, wherever Rebbe goes and wherever he went, that's where the Sanhedrin moved along. And that was the Gevaldikite of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. And then came the first generation, and then it was sealed. Rebbe is Soif, Mishnah, done. Mishnayos can't be touched. Now, Mishnayos is the source of everything, and everything comes out, and now we begin the Amoraim. And the Amoraim, we're not going to, I wanted to get to Amoraim Yisrael today, but we can't. But Amoraim were, the Amoraim were Talmidim of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. The first generation of Amoraim was Reb Chia, Rabbi Shiur ben Levi. All these people are kemat in Brises. They are kemat Tanoim themselves. Rabbi Shia, Bakapara, and all these people were living in Eretz Yisrael, and life was still in Eretz Yisrael. But unfortunately, Antoninus was a very, very benevolent emperor, and since he was a benevolent emperor, there was also another pull coming along, and that were the Christians. And the Christians were starting to gain a foothold. Again, we started, the beginning of the Tanam is the beginning of the Christian thing, and it took 100 or 200 years for them to really gain momentum. And the Romans hated them, and the Romans persecuted them, and the Romans did not allow them to shine, and the Romans were against the Christians. But now that there was Antoninus, and he was benevolent, and he was accepting, and he didn't have the power and the authority, he was more calm, now the Christians start standing up. And once the Christians stand up, eventually the Romans accepted the Christians, and so much so it ended up becoming that the Roman Empire became the Roman Catholic Church. It simply adapted Christianity. Once that happened, now the Yidden were able to survive through the Romans and survive through everything, but they could not survive through the Christians. The Christians was the end. And then this is really the beginning of the end of Eretz Yisrael, and therefore Amorai Eretz Yisrael is just another few generations, but everyone is going to shift to Bavel. Mechi Oser Rav LeBavel, Rav comes to Bavel, suddenly comes the Amoraim of Bavel. And that's the Amoraim, the Talmud Bavli that we are familiar with. And in Eretz Yisrael is just a few generations of Talmud Yerushalmi, way less, it's 200 years less, is the Talmud Yerushalmi over the Talmud Bavli. I thought I'd get through Amoraim of Eretz Yisrael today, but just one more minute, if we could just now chazer over this chart, and hopefully this chart that we started with will never look the same. I beg everyone if you could just get this chart, that this chart should never look the same. We have Hey, Shag, Shai. And we have this is Hillel, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Gamliel, Hazokain, and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who was killed up Kiddush Hashem, and this is now the Churban. We have Hillel and Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Then we have Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua with Rabbi Gamliel di Yavne. Correct? Are we together? Hopefully these names now mean something. Then we have Rabbi Akiva. Now, Rabbi Akiva is really with Rabbi Gamliel di Yavne. And then we have the 5 Talmidim, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. Then we have Rabbeinu Yehuda Hanasi. We have over here Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who was the Nasi afterwards, that Rabbi Yehuda really took his place a little. And then we have Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and this is really the Tanoim, as a broken chain straight from Hillel, in father to son, as a broken chain straight from Hillel to Rabbeinu HaKadosh in Rebbe to Talmud. And and these are the three tkufas. The first tkufa until the Beis Hamikdash for 100 years, the second tkufa for 75 years, the second tkufa until the end of the Tanam, until the Chasimas HaMishnah. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.